So South Africa are back-to-back World Cup champions after we had New Zealand, who were back-to-back World Cup champions. The one thing I kept thinking about as I left the office on Saturday night was actually how this had been a bit of an embarrassment for the Northern Hemisphere, because we'd sort of had this situation where, there was so much hope and expectation around France and Ireland, and it's two coin flip games, but actually New Zealand and South Africa still run the game, and at the moment it's the Springboks who are on top. Charlie, I'm a bit sad that Jack Nienaber is going to Leinster, because I sort of want to see if Razzie and Jack can run it back for a third time and win the third World Cup in a row. I mean, 4 years is a long time, and you never know who's to say that he won't come back after a couple of years. But where do you think this team kind of sits, and do you think, in 4 years' time, are we going to be chatting about South Africa being world champions again?
I'd be very interested to see how Nienaber works out at Leinster, and whether he does come back. As you say, 4 years is a hell of a long time, and those two seem to gravitate towards each other, don't they? I got asked about where they sort of stood as a side in the greatest ever debate. I think that you can separate greatest ever World Cup side and greatest ever side sort of more generally, and I think they'd have much more of a chance of being in the former. And I think your criteria there are how close all of those knockout games are, and how they've managed to navigate them. How this last tournament was, on the face of it, really open, with the top four so far ahead of each other, and for them to have beaten. I know they lost to Ireland. In the group stage, but to beat France and then beat New Zealand, I think is such a huge achievement, hugely impressive. Can they go for a third? They're going to have to remodel a lot of their squad, I think. A lot of them are on the aging side. However, they've also shown a willingness to pick guys at the sort of in their mid and even late 30s. They have a lot of players playing in Japan, which we sort of know is less kind of abrasive, or has seemed to be less abrasive and less arduous for players, and has the potential to prolong those careers. What was really interesting was that I wouldn't say they were bullish in much of the press that they did and much of the messaging that they were putting out. But one thing that they were, from the first time I heard Nienaber mention it, and he might have mentioned it before, but was after the Qatar Cup at Twickenham, when they pumped New Zealand. He said, look, this result isn't going to matter, because the World Cup and us getting to four and becoming the first side to get to four, as well as retaining it and becoming the second side to do that, that's what really matters to us. They had this higher purpose. So becoming the first side to do it 3 times, you imagine if you fast forward, that will be a really, really big driver.
Can I be a bit contrarian and butt in? Can I offer the point that I think the fact that they only won their knockout matches by 1 point, it actually fights against them in the argument for the greatest World Cup team ever, because New Zealand 2015 just demolished everybody at a canter and retained their back-to-back titles from 2011 to 2015 and absolutely obliterated everybody. So I don't think that South Africa are quite hit that level yet, but I must admit they are pretty close. And for them to beat France and New Zealand, well, I mean, I suppose they did lose to Ireland, but for them to beat France and New Zealand in the knockouts, and an almighty English effort, really was impressive, and they were worthy winners in the end. But I don't think they're quite up there with the 2015 All Blacks just yet.
The only thing I'd say to that, Charles, is that it's a fair point, but they've also, the kind of gauntlet they had to run, I think, is a bit harder than teams have had to do in the past. I sort of went through the past World Cup champions' road to success for a piece on Sunday, and there was always kind of, there tended to be like a blowout somewhere along the way in the quarterfinals and semi-final, or like at least like a 10, 12-point win. And also South Africa they've had to face the other top 5 teams in the top 6 aside from themselves in this tournament, and they've lost one of those to Ireland. So they really have faced the best in the world. There's been no gimmies. I wonder if that kind of strengthens their your argument more. I don't necessarily think this will sound like I'm really splitting hairs. I don't think they're necessarily the best collection of players to win a World Cup. I think the 2015 All Blacks are probably better. Same with England in 2003, maybe would be a strong case, and also the 1999 Wallabies. Come to think of it, but I, in terms of the best team, in terms of the best kind of a group of players playing for each other and getting the best out of each other, I think that's what makes the argument better. I think Johnny, I've even said this. Charlie, you might remember the quote better. He even said that like we might not necessarily have like the best players in each position, but we have the right players. I think he said we sort of have the right players for what we want to achieve as a team, and I think that's kind of what shone through for me in terms of where this team might rank.
I think that plays into what a job Erasmus and Ninaba have done as a coaching duo, and not to, and I'm sure that the other guys around them, Felix Jones and those guys have done a huge job as well. But it's how resourceful they are. So how they, the 7-1 split is a great example of a side sort of dragging a game towards how they want to play it, and I think that's hugely admirable as well. I agree with. I think both of you have made the point that 2015 All Black side is special, probably more rounded, probably had more star power as far as individual players. Had remarkable star players in there. They had a chunk of sort of all-time greats, iconic players within that. But I just think in World Cups, they are just such a weird, isolated ecosystem where for 2 months it feels like anything can happen. And I think navigating that, and I agree with Ben, the difficulty of South Africa's run, in contrast to the difficulty of their run in 2019. Actually, in 2023 they had a much more difficult route, and to navigate that just speaks volumes for their adaptability, their resourcefulness, and actually the sort of innovative tweaks that they've made along the way.
Charles, let's chat about the cards a bit more because we sort of touched on it a bit earlier. So with the Kane one on Jesse Creel, I'll admit when I first watched the replay of it, I thought that Creel's kind of change in direction might act as mitigation, but they seem to come to the conclusion that Creel had changed direction early enough that Kane had time to adjust his body height. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, maybe it looks like that in the slow-mo, but I thought it played in real time. That was, it was kind of tight. But nevertheless, Kane is so upright. It's clear head contact. It's not a lot of mitigation. Like, I can't see a way around that being a red, really. Can you?
No, not at all. It was Stonewall, I think. It was Stonewall, and I think as soon as I think he might have known as well. He didn't look like a happy man sat on that seat, the plastic seat chair of death on the sidelines. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, he was too high. A change of direction does nothing to mitigate against the fact that a player is too high. If you're too high, then a change of direction really doesn't actually mean anything because it's only a change in body height from the attacker that's going to mean something. And he was too high, and he paid the consequences for it. It's the only tackle he's got wrong in the entire tournament, and I'm guessing he'll be playing that through, despite his fabulous performances in the knockouts. And he was very good at the start of that final as well, and his unbelievable game against Ireland. I'm sure that's the tackle he'll be playing through in his mind for years and years.
I was just thinking what a mad World Cup he's had. Yeah, because he basically went from being kind of written off as was he even going to start ahead of Dalton Papali'i, and then it was no, he's back in for the quarters and he plays arguably the game of his All Blacks career with that performance against Ireland. He was very good in the semi-final, and then this happens. I mean, yeah, he's really been through the ringer.
Well, Captain hindsight, maybe Dalton Papali'i should have started.
Yeah, maybe. Although that then gave us the Dalton Papali'i moment at the end with Faf's tap tackle, which
the tap tackle
we'll chat about a bit later. Charlie, it's pretty horrible, isn't it? What was Kane like afterwards?
I thought incredibly impressive, like genuinely incredible ability to front up and actually talk about it, and his voice was sort of quivering with the emotion of it, which was totally understandable. And he I've forgotten the line now, but it's something like I'm going to have to live with this forever. He refused to sort of he it was quite chilling actually. He sort of refused to he said, look, we've been at this tournament for 2 months, and the atmosphere of the tournament was always felt that was going to be a red. You felt brutal for him, because I just think it's one of those in a final. Do you take more heed of that mitigation? I thought there was, and live, and this is the thing, the live. It was he hit Creel. They both went down at that ruck. Khaleesi joins the ruck and he taps his head towards Wayne Barnes, and then even if there's these players are human, we could talk about all this rubbish about values as much as we want, but it's their prerogative to sort of highlight these things if they think it's going to get an advantage, and you almost always get that feeling, don't you? That ominous feeling of that's going to be close, and we know enough. We've seen it enough now. It's just up to it just goes to chance straight away, and Kane knew, and that's what his sort of answer reflected, was that I put myself in that position, so I can't have any complaints. But I thought it was remarkable that he was that measured about it. He'd obviously had quite a while to think about his answer because he'd been off since the 30th minute. But no, he did. He was really, really impressive.